Welcome back, my friends, to AA Recovery Interviews. I'm your host, Howard L., and I'm an alcoholic. Sober since January 1st, 1988, one day at a time. I'm grateful you've joined us. AA Recovery Interviews is the podcast where Alcoholics Anonymous members from around the world share their timeless and extraordinary stories of experience, strength, and hope. There are over 165 awesome interviews in this podcast series. I invite you to scroll through my past episodes wherever you get your podcasts. My guest on today's podcast is Bruno R., who first attended AA to satisfy the terms of probation after his first DWI. His half-hearted attempts resulted in short stints of sobriety, but he wasn't ready to do what AA suggested. Even after violating his probation with another DWI, Bruno remained resistant to AA recovery and continued to drink. Facing felony charges after his third DWI in Texas, Bruno was looking at 10 years in prison. Somehow, he was given another chance to embrace AA. After years of drinking and regular drug use as a functional alcoholic, Bruno finally reached the bottom of the bottom. The next time he walked into Alcoholics Anonymous, he was ready to get a sponsor, attend meetings, study the big book, and be of service in the fellowship. That was 12 years ago, and Bruno has remained a ready and willing participant in his own recovery. I've had the pleasure of knowing Bruno for the past dozen years, and it's gratifying to see him being of service to so many men. I am happy to share his enthusiasm for the program and his cheerful approach for the very basics of staying sober, one day at a time. So please sit back for this new episode of AA Recovery Interviews while you soak up the words of my friend and AA brother, Bruno R.
I'm Bruno, I'm an alcoholic.
Hi, Bruno. Thanks so much for doing the AA Recovery Interviews podcast with me tonight.
I appreciate it. It's an honor, privilege to be asked to do this.
Well, what's really great about it is that we are celebrating your birthday, and you picked up a 12-year chip tonight. And that is just astounding.
It blows my mind to think that it's been 12 years, because it seems like just yesterday I was scared walking back into the rooms and had no idea how any of this was going to work, and just so much fear and just doubt, not thinking that this could even be possible. If you would have told me back then that if you just follow these simple 12 steps, your life would be more than you could ever imagine, I was not going to believe that.
You mentioned when you came back, had you been in AA before?
So I got introduced to the program when I was 19, and I was going to school in Austin, and I had a really bad car accident in downtown Austin after a night of drinking and should not have been behind the wheel, and I ended up rolling my vehicle about 10 times down I-35.
And were you the only person in the car?
No, there were two of my buddies were in the car. Luckily, we all walked away. Yet a miracle that we were able to all walk away. But of course, I was the one behind the wheel, so I got arrested for my first DWI. And part of the probation was to start going to AA meetings. And that's where I went to my first meeting in downtown Austin. I was 19 at the time, not ready to really give in.
So you were court-ordered into AA.
I was court-ordered.
Which is one of the ways that people do get into the program. I've got to hand it to the justice system. Judges are encouraging through choice, and they usually give you the choice to go to jail or go to AA, and that's a pretty easy choice for most people. You can pretend that you're going or enjoying or learning something from AA. Once you go to prison, it's a different story. So I'm all in favor of judges giving people that option. So you got that option. What were the terms of the number of days and paper signed and that kind of thing?
I believe it was twice a week that I was supposed to get it signed. So my routine, since I could work it around my schedules, I would go on Mondays and Fridays. And it was a noon meeting, so I would go during lunch. It was a very well-established meeting. It was downtown Austin, so a lot of professionals there, not a lot of college students. It was mainly professionals. I didn't hear a lot because I wasn't ready yet, but the one thing that I did come away at that time was just the openness and the friendliness of the AA community.
Hmm.
Because I remember thinking in the back of my head, well, if I ever have to come back here, at least they're going to be nice to me.
What was your first meeting like when you walked in?
Man, I remember like it was yesterday. It was scary. I specifically chose this meeting because I thought it was far enough away from the UT campus.
You didn't want your friends or anybody else seeing you in there, huh?
Yeah, I had no clue, right? I didn't know how the program worked. But the funny thing is, it wasn't that far from campus. It was probably 6-7 blocks right down the street, but I could still walk to it and then get back to classes. I did listen to a lot of what was being shared, but I just wasn't ready to take it in.
Because it didn't apply to you, or because you were still young and you're in college and this is just what college people do?
I just thought, how can I give up drinking now when I'm not even 21 yet? I can't legally, buy alcohol yet. So how could I give it up? It was a fluke deal, accident, which it wasn't, because I had had other accidents or other incidences, somewhat not that bad, but it wasn't the first time. I just wasn't ready.
While you were going to AA, were you still drinking on campus?
We were not allowed to have alcohol in our dorms, so people weren't just openly drinking in the dorms, but around campus, yeah, I mean, keg parties and stuff. And
So that part of the AA program just didn't gel for you.
now, really looking back on it, maybe at that time I didn't really understand the disease and how bad it was.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't think that I was an alcoholic. I could stop whenever I wanted to, if I had to. It hadn't taken over my life yet at that point.
Had you ever known anybody who was in Alcoholics Anonymous growing up?
No, the only exposure I'd had is what I'd seen in movies or TV shows, but I didn't know anyone that had been in the program.
Where did you grow up?
I grew up outside of Houston in Spring, Texas.
When you were coming up as a kid and you heard the phrase, he's an alcoholic, what ran through your mind as a kid?
Probably the worst thing you could think of is someone sleeping under a bridge or homeless person.
What was your home life like when you were growing up?
Home life was really good. I've got 2 brothers. I'm the middle one.
Mm-hmm.
Our parents didn't let us out of our bubble a lot. We were very sheltered. I was born in Monterrey, Mexico. That's where my family's from. And when my parents came over here, they didn't speak the language. They thought the best way to protect us was to shelter us, right? Because they were in a foreign land. But at the same time, they wanted us to go to school and do really good in school and get educated. I mean, we had really close family, but it was just us. We weren't allowed to have like friends sleep over or go to sleepovers, do all the video game stuff all night. Our parents were just against that.
What did you know when you were a kid of any other alcoholism or alcohol, what you now know might have been alcohol abuse when you were a kid, as you're looking at your life as a kid around you?
I didn't see it then, but my parents didn't keep alcohol in the house. So we didn't see it directly from our parents. But where I picked it up or where I would see it is from one of my uncles who was a really heavy drinker. At least in those years, I don't think I can remember seeing him without a drink in his hand. And he would drive us around. And I can remember my dad would get really upset with him, telling him that, hey, you can't be drinking while you're driving my kids around. Like, this is you can do whatever you want to with your family, but if you're going to drive my kids around, there's no drinking. So that was probably the early memories that I have of having someone with that addiction problem.
How was that received by your uncle? I mean, did he adhere to that from that point on, or do you remember other times that he did it anyway?
He would do it anyway. Basically tell us, just don't tell your dad. And, to us, he was the cool uncle.
Is he still alive?
He's still alive, yeah. From my understanding, because I don't really speak to him that much, my understanding is he's still a drinker. He's just not as heavy of a drinker. But that's because he's had a lot of health issues because of his drinking. But he's never fully given it up. He does have a son who's a doctor in Mexico, and I'm sure his son has try to emphasize that point with him. And knowing him as hard headed as he was, even coming from his son, it wouldn't register.
When did you take a drink on your own volition when you were growing up?
The first time I took it on my own was the summer between seventh and eighth grade. That would have put me at 14-ish, maybe something like that. But before that, that same uncle, sometimes when we would be out, and of course he would have a beer with him, he would hand it to us and say, "Hey, do you want to take a drink?" And being that young, I mean, you take a little sip, and okay, that's gross. Like, probably the first time I had a sip, I would probably say it was like 10 or 11, maybe.
So by the time you turned 14, you were ready to do it on your own or with other friends?
That's exactly what happened with a group of us. One of my buddies had stolen a bottle of Crown from his dad's liquor cabinet. We took it off into the woods out at Spring, and we drank hot Crown Royal in the middle of the summertime.
Oh, that is nasty.
I had never tasted liquor. I didn't know what that was like. And then on top of that, we're drinking hot Crown Royal. We stayed out in the woods, and I don't remember a lot of what we did out there, but I enjoyed the feeling that I got from that high so much that it scared me, because I was already under a lot of stress, but that was the first relief that I had had. It did. It scared me straight for the next 2 years.
Did you get violently sick?
I didn't throw up. I definitely blacked out. And then I got home, and my parents knew something was wrong, and I just couldn't stop laughing. They didn't know. After that incident, I didn't hang out with those guys ever again. I think one of the beauties of the program for me has been that I've been able to trace back and see where the trauma started. And for me, my trauma started in the third grade. Before third grade, since we had immigrated over and I was still learning the language, I was in what's called ESL classes, English Second Language, right? And third grade was the first year that I had gone to the regular classes. Well, I was always pretty sharp and hardworking, so to me, school was always really easy. And I was bored, so I would act out in class. And I'm in a new group with new students, so I was trying to be the funny guy and just get laughs out of the kids and all that, and being disruptive, right? Well, the teacher one day had had enough, and she told me to go outside and just wait for her out in the hallway. So I did, and as soon as she got out there, I was gonna make a smart remark or smart comment, right? But I didn't even get that opportunity because she slapped me right across my face. And she was a really tall black woman, and she told me that I should act more like my people. And why was I trying to act different and all this stuff? It really, really upset me, but I held back tears because I wasn't going to let her see me cry, right? But from that point forward, like, it triggered something in me where because she had said I was not good enough. Like, I had to always try to be better than my other classmates. So when I say that, I mean, I had a lot of pressure. Like, I put that pressure on myself. Like, I was going to be the top student. I was going to do this. I was going to go above and beyond because of that incident. And the amazing thing is that I had pretty much forgotten about that, and it was blacked out of my memory until I went back and did the work and went back and started pinpointing how far back the trauma went.
Is this the work that you did in the current 12-year period of your sobriety?
Correct.
Okay, so you had the opportunity to review your past to identify this trauma, did you ever seek out any professional help for that?
I did not, because I always use it as a motivator. So my parents never had to worry about my homework, my grades, none of that, because I was always pushing myself. And even for all the extracurricular activities, the sports, all of that, all the clubs, I was telling them when we had to be there, what time I needed to be dropped off, all those good things, and they never had to worry about any of it.
So you were very self-motivated. There was a part of you that really wanted to excel at the things that you were doing. A lot of times that trauma is what drives us. You mentioned an immediate relief, though, from feeling that way whenever it was you first drank. What did the booze do to that feeling? Did it make you forget it? Did it numb it out? How did it affect that particular feeling?
So in sixth grade, I started out in the Klein School District, and as you know, back then that was a very
Oh, yeah.
competitive district.
Still
It still
is.
is, and that was one of the reasons my parents wanted us to move out there was the schools were top notch, best in the state. So I get into sixth grade where it's a lot more competitive than where I came from HISD, and now everyone is smart. It's not just two or three
Yeah,
people.
yeah.
Everyone is smart. So I had to work that much harder, which was okay. I was willing to do it, but it wasn't. I wasn't just gonna, you know, skim by and be at the top of the class. I really had to work at it. So sixth and seventh grade were that. We're working really
And this
hard.
is just prior to you finding alcohol with your friends.
And then that summer after the seventh grade, we went out into the woods and
So you said you drank that one time, and then you didn't drink again for 2 years. What was there about that experience, that one time, that made you know that you could make whatever you were feeling kind of go away or numb it out?
I think it was just the release. Like for the first time, I felt that euphoria, and I didn't have that pressure of always having to compete, and it was all gone. Like it was just, it didn't matter at that point. And that's what really scared me about it was that I knew that my my goals weren't finished. So if I were to continue to drink at that point, I could lose out on all these things that I'm trying to achieve. So yeah, just a lot of will to say. I mean, I even cut out those friends. I didn't hang out with them anymore.
How prophetic all that is. I mean, don't you think so? Yeah, here you are at 14 making a decision that takes people having to suffer for years before coming into the program to finally get to. And here you were at 14 knowing what you knew and letting that one time be sufficient to not drink for the 2 years. That's amazing.
And then jumping back on the straight and narrow, and I got right back into my schoolwork. I played on the football team, so I dedicated more time to the football program. I mean, I just dedicated all my efforts to everything else.
But did you ever forget that one time and the feeling? Did that come back to you at some point?
I never forgot it because when later on in high school, when I started drinking on a regular basis, I started chasing that initial feeling.
Did you ever catch it? And if so, for how long?
I don't, it's hard to say. I would say probably not because that's what kept
Yeah.
me trying to catch it. And then also elevating and going to other things because now it just alcohol wasn't doing it, so I needed to do other substances to try to get to that point.
And you're still trying to do the straight and narrow stuff, but what triggered the re-entry into alcohol use for you?
Going into my junior year, I was on the varsity team, varsity football. So of course we're going to all the varsity parties, and a lot of peer pressure. Everyone that I knew was doing it. I just figured, well, why not? If everyone's doing it, it's okay.
When you started drinking at that point, after what had happened to you 2 years earlier, were you hoping for that same effect from alcohol, or again, did you not know what to expect?
I probably didn't know what to expect. To me, it was a complete release. Looking back on it now, it was just so meticulous, right? It was just like a lot of thought was put into it, but it just kind of happened. But so Sunday night through Friday afternoon, I was completely dedicated, all about my schoolwork, all about football, soccer, whatever sport we were playing.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. Soon as Friday came, and Friday right after school, we would start drinking. There's no books, there's nothing, like there was released
For the whole weekend?
Friday, Saturday, and then Sunday, jump right back into the books. Wow. So I was a weekend warrior.
So you were very much a functional drinker at that point.
Mm-hmm.
Did you feel like you were overdoing it at that time, or were there signs and signals to you that you chose to ignore about maybe you're drinking too much, maybe you're not being responsible with it? What sort of things came up for you in that way?
Yeah, there was a lot of signs. So I would see how other people would drink, and I had no interest in doing that,
Yeah.
So I knew pretty early on that I drank heavier than a lot of my classmates.
Was it ever pointed out to you by them?
Oh, yeah.
What kind of things did they say to you?
Maybe not in a negative way, but I was always known as the party guy, and because we had access and because we were the life of the party.
So you continued to drink through high school. What were your grades like?
Straight A's, because I was pushing myself. And my dad, his whole outlook on us being here in the U.S. was for education, and that was it. So all the sports and all that, he was not a fan of. So in order for us to participate in those events, we had to maintain straight A's. So in the 8th grade, I tried to test my dad.
Yeah.
And I got a B in one of my classes. I think I got an 89 on purpose to see what he would do. So I'm going to the game, and my coaches didn't tell me till it was time for the kickoff. You got to sit out the first half. What do you mean? Your dad says, we can't play you. And I looked at the stands, and he was right there looking at me. Well, he was doing it to prove a point that, hey, even though you're playing for the schools now, if you don't maintain your straight A's, you're not going to play.
So he proved his point, didn't he?
He did. And I never got another B again.
Were there ever any times that you had consequences of the drinking that either affected you and the people around you, and then your folks had needing to get involved, that kind of thing?
Yeah, that started when I was 17. I had a very unique group of friends. I had the jocks, and those were the Friday through Saturday crowd to drink. But during the week, I was hanging out with the AP kids, all the smart kids, because we were in the classes together, all the band guys, study sessions, all of that. So I was able to hang out with them, get our work done, and then go play our games and then hang out with the other group. So I had a really good mix of friends.
Do you recall any times that the drinking got you in trouble, or, beyond the thing with the 89?
Yeah, so at 17, I got arrested for the first time. We were at a party, and there was probably 5 or 6 of us inside the yard, just urinating next to the house because the restrooms were full inside the house. Well, the police came through that gate, and I was the first one next to the gate. So, of course, they grabbed me and took me in for my first arrest was for an indecent exposure for urinating outside. And
Did any of your other friends get arrested with you?
I was the only one they took down.
What was that like?
It was very scary because they wanted to prove a point. So normally that's, I think, a $35, $50 fine. And if you spend the night in jail, that would cover the cost, right? And they took me to the Cypress Wood police station, which I could have stayed there the night and gotten released the next morning. But they decided they're going to teach me a lesson, and they actually took me all the way downtown to San Jacinto. So at 17 years old, I'm downtown in the real jail. Yeah, and I'm not even supposed to be there because technically you're supposed to be 18 to get admitted in, but they threw me in there. And even when I went to see the judge, she was like, "Why are you here? Like, you should have stayed up there. You're gone. We're gonna get ready to release you."
Was there anything in your behavior towards the police or while you were with them that made them feel like they had to be a little bit tougher on you?
Not that I recall.
Were you pretty drunk at that point?
Yeah, I was definitely having a good time. I mean, it was a Friday night and like that.
So how about that classic first phone call? What was that like?
Oh God, terrible.
What happened?
First of all, my parents already knew because I had driven there, and the buddy that I was with had to drop my car off at my parents' house. So he had to tell them what had happened. So by the time I called, they were aware of it.
What was their reaction?
They were At that time they were just more worried about getting me out and making sure I was okay, and there wasn't anything wrong with no harm or anything.
You'd been scared straight at least once before. What kind of impact did that night in jail have on you?
Probably not what I should have gotten, but really what I walked out of there thinking was it wasn't that bad. I mean, I was in and out first try.
What's next in your journey beyond high school? Take us down that path a little.
I graduated from high school, and I was at the top 6 or 7% of the class, and I was automatically accepted into UT Austin, into their engineering program. Even though I'm the second one in the family, I was the first one to go away to school. I'd never been away from my family, and I think that had some psychological challenges with it, not having that support structure. And I get to Austin, I was focused on school. The engineering program at UT is huge. Did pretty well the first year, no major issues. Second semester though, it all came crumbling down. So I had the wreck. Then about a month later, one of my good friends that was still in high school, she passed away in a car accident. Very sad. Especially, I mean, she was a great person.
And this happened relatively short period after your crash?
About a month. That ended up being the worst semester for me, dealing with all of that. At that time, I was in the electrical engineering program, and it just wasn't clicking. I did end up breaking up with my high school girlfriend at that time. But I just stayed focused on school, and I had all this other stress going on.
You got through that first year. Did you change your major at that point?
I did, actually, since I wasn't really enjoying the electrical engineering route. And I was going to have to take that class over because I didn't do well in it.
What was your folks' response to you not doing well in that class?
It was a shock, because when I had done really well this entire time, and then all of a sudden you're not passing, you're having a really hard time. They were also aware of all the outside factors that were. My parents have always been really involved. They knew then because they were suggesting I should get help for alcohol then.
So they were seeing something in you at 19, 20 years old. What was your response to their concern?
I brushed it off. I told them, no, I'm fine. I'll just buckle down and I'll work harder. I'll take care of it. Don't worry about it.
What did that do to your relationship with your parents?
It didn't improve it. I mean, it definitely hurt it. The thing is, they didn't know how to help me. And even when they were trying to help, when I was turning it down, they didn't know what else they could do, right? So to them, they felt like the only thing that they could do is, okay, well, we'll just continue to pay for school and whatever you need so you can get through this.
This is after the accident that your parents expressed their concern to you and you brush it off. So you've had a few things happen that are indicators of a mounting problem. So you've moved through the use phase to the misuse phase to the maybe abuse phase of alcohol.
Oh yeah, by that time it was definitely abuse.
How long did you have to do the court-ordered AA?
It was 2 years, and in those 2 years, I didn't stop drinking, but I definitely slowed down.
Mm.
Now that all these other factors had happened, I focused on school again, and I was starting to do really well in the mechanical engineering program. So, from my parents' standpoint, they saw it as okay, so he just needed to change focus, and now he's back on track, right? And things were going well. I had gotten this internship, um, working for a power plant. Things were looking great. I was supposed to go back to Austin at the end of the summer, so in September, and I think I was going to be out for probation that October. Well, one of the guys I had met at the power plant, he came up to Austin one weekend, literally the weekend before I was supposed to be released off of probation, and he was a big drinker. So I took him out in Austin, and we just got ridiculously drunk. I ended up driving down the wrong way on a one-way street, and I get pulled over. We both get arrested. But now this is my second DWI. So I violated my probation on the first one while picking up the second one, literally 2 or 3 days before I was supposed to be released.
So how did that play out?
Not good. Since I was a student, what they did is they just extended the probation another 2 years. And continuing with the AA meetings, but now they started including treatment and doing the IOPs, and there were some other items I had to go do, go see a therapist. And
What kind of jail alternative did they give you if you decided, no, I'm not going to do any of that stuff, I'll just go to jail?
at that time, I think it was going to be like 18 months or 2 years. The irony is that I was doing well in school. I mean, I'd gotten this great internship. I mean, things were going well outside of the drinking. But then, even after the second one and violating on the first, I still didn't think I had a problem. I just turned 21. So by 21, I was on my second one.
So are you back on your best behavior, or what was your attitude after that?
I was on better behavior, but I was definitely not on my best behavior. Because by that time, I had moved off campus, and I think at that time I was living in South Austin with a buddy of mine, and he was a big party animal. But what I was focused on was, again, that I went back to my weekend warrior phase. So during the week, even my roommate, he never saw me. I was in school. I was doing what I had to do to knock it out. But then come Friday afternoon, it was like a switch.
We'll be right back. My friends, if you're enjoying AA Recovery interviews, I invite you to check out my latest audiobook, Alcoholics Anonymous, the story of how more than 100 men have recovered from alcoholism. This is the word-for-word, cover-to-cover reading of the first edition of the Big Book, published in 1939. It's a relaxing yet meaningful and engaging way to listen to the Big Book anytime, any place. Have a free listen at Audible, iTunes, or Amazon. While you're there, search for my other audiobook, Lost Stories of the Big Book, 30 original stories from the first and or second editions, missing from the third and fourth editions of Alcoholics Anonymous. It's an engaging audiobook that brings these stories to life for AA members who've never seen them. These timeless testimonials were originally cut to make room for newer stories in the third and fourth editions. But their vitally important messages of hope are as meaningful today as they were when they were first published. Many listeners will hear these stories for the very first time. It's also available from Amazon as a Kindle book or in paperback if you'd like to read along. You're going to love it. And we're back. From the chronological standpoint, how many years are we now till you hit 12 years ago?
So that's when I was 21, and it would be another 15 years.
How would you describe that 15-year period? And can you give us kind of a quick overview of what that looked like in your life, that chunk of time?
Some of it was good. I did end up getting through that probation. I did well enough to finish that one and got discharged. And interesting thing on that, so the last 6 months of that program, I actually started going to AA on UT campus. They had a young people's meeting, like literally on the building next door to the mechanical engineering building. Met every day at noon, so I started going in there. I actually got, he said he was my sponsor, but we didn't really work any steps. So technically he was a sponsor, but we didn't work any steps because I wasn't ready. But he was willing. It was my fault completely, or my lack of dedication to it. But I managed to stay sober for 6 months. I hung around people, young people in AA that were serious about sobriety. So some of that started to rub off on me. So I remember thinking at that point, like, this isn't too bad. Like, I could do this and not drink. And I'm getting ready to graduate. I had already landed a really good job in Austin. Everything was looking positively, right? And I was like, if I ever had to not drink, then maybe I could do it. But then I graduated and went to work at this company, and literally my apartment was like 5 minutes from our office, and other guys that had already graduated, everyone's going out for happy hour. So, and then after that, I stayed in Austin, worked for a little while up there, but continued to drink. And I can say, looking back on it, my drinking was getting progressively worse because now I didn't have the restriction of having to do schoolwork. So now I'm just cut loose. So now it wasn't only Friday, Saturday. Now, okay, we're going to happy hours Thursdays. Well, wait a minute, Tuesday night has good drink specials.
So you had the kind of job that you didn't necessarily have to take home with you.
And still so close to my apartment. I mean, I could wake up 15 minutes before I had to be there. And
What did that do to your drinking at that time?
oh, it definitely increased, without a doubt.
Were there any drugs involved during this period?
Yeah, absolutely.
Like what?
So I started my drug use in high school. You know, easy stuff, smoking marijuana here and there. And as I got to college, got into ecstasy and some of the club drugs. And then by the time I graduated, not because I didn't have a connection at that time, but later on I would. But when I'd go out with friends and they had it, I was definitely doing cocaine if it was around. So, and it just got worse because I moved back here for a little bit. That job in Austin didn't pan out.
Yeah.
Worked here for a little bit, then got a job in Chicago, and that was probably the beginning of the end. Because Chicago parties hard, nonstop. Drinking and the drugs are everywhere. And I don't really know anyone there, so there's no one there to supervise me, or I'm on my own.
Were you drinking to black out at that point, or had it not gotten that bad?
It hadn't gotten that bad then, but I was definitely doing drugs to drink more.
So you're doing as much drinking as you can with the drugs to help.
Mm-hmm. And then there was issues there in Chicago too. I mean, I got into another car accident there. Luckily, there was no one else was involved, but destroyed my car, and it got so bad because I was really lonely up there as well. Because like I said, I was by myself. I actually picked up the phone one night when I was probably blacked out. Picked up the phone and called their intergroup.
Really?
And the next morning, someone met me at a Starbucks, and he took me to a meeting there in Lincoln Park. I don't remember anything about the meeting or anything. I just remember that someone showed up, and they said that they would. And the guy gave me his number, and he said, when you're ready, call me. But I never did.
But somehow a seed was planted from long ago that kind of resurfaced for that one occasion. And then what was your feeling after that one day?
So I remember going to the meeting. Like I said, I don't remember much of what happened in the actual meeting, but I remember walking away from that thinking, I'm still not ready.
So you're still not ready. You go back to the booze and the drugs. How long were you in Chicago for?
3 years. 3 years, and then I moved back to Houston because my younger brother had a brain aneurysm, and um, he almost died. And at that time, well, we're still really close, but we were the closest out of the siblings. And him going through that, um, I just felt like I had to be back here because he was here, and left. I was doing really well in Chicago with my job, um, very successful. Everything on the professional side was going really well. Personal side was a train wreck.
Yeah, yeah. So when you moved back, did you get a job with a local company here, or?
I did. I did. I started working with, initially, I was helping my brother with his
Mm-hmm.
business. That was the reason I moved. But then I got another job and moved into the house that I'm at now, still at the same place. But the problem there was I was in my late 20s, and I'd started working for this. It was sort of a startup company, but we had created a technology that no one else was using for power generation for turbines. So we were very much in demand. And what did this to my ego is it just shot my ego through the roof, thinking I was just untouchable, really. And along this whole time, the drinking is getting worse. And I got in that job with that company, and in the very second month of employment there, I get stopped for my third DWI. And to my surprise, the company supported me. They didn't fire me. They allowed me to keep working. They just knew that I was going to have some restrictions. But I got lucky because the way it got filed, it actually got filed as a second DWI. So it didn't count as the third, so it still wasn't a felony yet.
So on a technicality, you didn't have your third DWI?
I'd been arrested for 3, but it counted the way they booked it for whatever reason. It was a second, because it had to do with the violation on the first one. So when my attorney saw this, he said, "Look, you're getting 2 years of probation. Sign this right now, because you're not going to get a sweeter deal, and sign it before they figure out that it's really your third, and it's a felony."
So you dodged a bullet. That might have been very much of a God coincidence, right?
And at this point, what it's doing to me is it's making me think that I can get out of anything.
So that plus what was going on at your job sounds like a really dangerous concoction.
Absolutely.
How did that play out?
So I'm on probation again. This time, I'm not even going to AA meetings. I'm just signing
Signing it yourself.
ordinance. Yeah, because by now I'd learned, right? No one ever checks those things, but by this time the cocaine use had taken over, and I actually violated my probation on a dirty UA with cocaine. I knew I had an appointment with my probation officer on a Monday, and Saturday a buddy of mine calls me and says, "Hey, we're gonna go watch this fight at someone's house. You want to go?" I was like, "Sure, that would be safe, right? Someone's house, no big deal. I could have a couple of drinks, and I'll be home, and no big deal." Well, that's not what happened, of course. That there's drugs there. One thing leads to the next. Like, it's literally Sunday night, and I'm still doing coke, knowing I've got a drug test the next day. And I went in, but I did it because I didn't want to not do it, because it would have been a violation anyway.
It sounds like you were feeling kind of invincible at that point.
It's definitely a lot of that. Yeah.
That ego really jumps in, doesn't it?
And I thought too, but of course, the alcoholic thinking, I'm drinking a lot of water, I'm flushing it
Yeah,
out.
that's not enough.
It's not enough.
So you failed your UA.
So then they got me on the violation, but all they ended up giving me was like 4 weekends in jail in Houston, in Harris County. So, and that was it. And that took care of all the probation, all the other stuff. So I said, yes, let's take that. So I could be off of probation. I'll do the 4 weekends. Not a big deal.
And you went back to the same job?
Back to the same job. They didn't know anything about the violations. And to them, I mean, I was just gone on the weekends. It didn't didn't affect my work at all.
Sounds like things were starting to unravel, though, for you.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I would later get laid off from that company because of my alcohol and drug use. Started not showing up for work or showing up late, showing up hungover. Was not easy to work with. Just the list of anything you can think of. It was definitely taking effect. So I got laid off there in 2009 when the markets crashed, right? And then from 2009 to 2011 was the darkest time because I wasn't really employed. I was doing consulting work at that time. And to me, I felt like all the work, everything I had put in had gone because I wasn't doing anything substantial anymore.
And this goes straight to your ego, too, doesn't it?
Oh, yeah. I went from working for this company that everyone wanted to go work for and we're winning all these awards and everything. And I mean, at one point, I was like probably one of 10 people in the world that could even work on this technology. And now I'm unemployable. Yeah, it was definitely a kick to the ego.
The unemployability there, is that about potential hiring companies finding out about your background?
At that time, I had the 3 DWIs.
So they do a background check, they're going to see that immediately. They don't have to go any further with the interviewing process than that.
It's usually the first step, yeah.
That's unfortunate.
So I'm just getting by doing this consulting work. And then 2011 was the darkest year because it just seemed like there was no hope. It seemed like I was never going to get ahead. I'd fallen behind on payments on my property, so I was filing for bankruptcy. Like everything that the book tells us that is going to happen, happened, right? And it was all happening at once.
Was there a spouse or children involved at this point?
No, I've never been married and I don't have any kids. So then, you know, of course, I'm depressed and I'm trying to figure things out. And I'm driving in Austin in Lakeway. I had figured, again, alcoholic thinking, because at that time I was living in downtown Austin. If I just move out of the city and move out to the suburbs, this will take care of all my problems because I won't be by the bars.
Right.
So I move out to, if you know anything about Austin, I move out to Lakeway.
There's a really strong AA community there, too.
There is. I found that later. But there's also a lot of police activity out there, right? The first week I was out there, I get popped for my 4th DWI. And this is the end. This is it.
Let me ask you something. You're drinking, you go to get in your car. What are you thinking while you're getting into your car?
On that one, I don't remember any of it. So that was a complete blackout.
So nothing like, this is a bad idea, I probably shouldn't be doing it, but I'll do it anyway. So you blacked out to that. So nothing learned from it.
On that one, I woke up in jail, in Travis County Jail, the next morning. The last thing I remember was I was with a buddy at a bar, and it was the game where they had beat Cincinnati to go to the playoffs for the very first time ever in history, right? So we're celebrating, right? We finally got into the playoffs. And the last thing I remember is taking a shot with him, and that's it. And that game ended probably at 3 or 4 o'clock. I got arrested at 1 o'clock in the morning in Lakeway. So I was trying to drive home, and I just never made it. This time, it just feels different.
How so?
For some reason, I was in my own cell, and I thought that was kind of weird because it wasn't like that before. And I remember getting on the intercom and asking the guard to let me out so I can go call my lawyer. And he told me, you know, don't worry about calling your lawyer. You're not going to go anywhere for a while. And that scared the crap out of me. So what I did do, and I still go back to this, and I think this is probably one of the reasons that I was saved, right, is I got down on that bench. I think for the first time in a very long time, I actually prayed. But I didn't pray for God to get me out of this. I prayed that I hadn't hurt anyone the night before. Because that, I don't think I could have lived with that. And I was willing to take my punishment, whatever it was. And then finally, I go see the judge, and it's just another DWI. It's the fourth DWI, but this one is the felony.
Mm-hmm.
I get back to my area, and I call my dad because it's the only person that I need to call. By this time, they've had 20 years of calls like this happening, right? So I talked to my dad, and I mean, he's just pissed. Like, I don't think I've ever heard him that pissed before. And he told me, he's like, no, you need to stay in there. We're not getting you out this time.
How did you feel about your dad at that moment?
At that moment, I was pissed, obviously, because I wanted to get out.
Sure.
And the other thing, too, is like, I mean, I had money to bail myself out, but my wallet wasn't in my property. I had left it in the console of my vehicle, which had been towed. So if I just had my wallet, I could have bailed myself out.
Yeah.
But I didn't have it.
So all these little factors are floating around and it's starting to coalesce.
Exactly. All those little details. And here's the other one, too, is by this time I'm a veteran at DWIs, right? On all the other ones, I always refused the breathalyzer. On this one, I actually let them draw blood.
Mm.
So they had the record. I never would have done that before.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know how. And again, I was blacked out when this was going on, so I don't even remember that. So I think that was God working for me, doing for me what I can do for myself. And then this time there was no getting out of it. So it's difficult to say, but my blood alcohol level was like a 0.32, 4 times the limit. So I'm very fortunate that I didn't hit or kill anyone else. I didn't even get in a car accident that night. It was just literally another DWI.
So, once again, are we scared straight yet? Or what was the outcome of all that?
Not yet, but we're getting close.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
At this point, though, since I had missed jail time on the real third one,
Mm-hmm.
the DA was going to set an example, and they weren't offering probation this time. They were offering 10 years.
Mm.
And that was it.
That was the only choice.
That was it. So from that time, because I actually got arrested in, I think it was December 13th of 2011, until the next year when I sobered up. That year was the darkest because I was preparing myself to go into jail, or go into prison. And things got really bad. I did a last, say, boys trip. It was a trip with one of my buddies to Chicago, like a farewell trip. Blacked out pretty much the entire time.
Mm.
But one of my friends somehow had gotten a hold of me, and she told me that the night before I tried to jump out of a window of our hotel. Don't remember any of it. I thought she was joking. But how would
you know if you were blacked out?
So we get back to Houston, then the next weekend, I'm still thinking, my life is pretty much over at this point.
Yeah.
Ended up having some friends over, and this girl that I was seeing, she almost killed herself in my house. She was really drunk. She broke a window and cut her wrist on the window and was bleeding out, and we have to call an ambulance to come get her. The cops could have easily arrested me at that point because I was out on a bond.
Mm-hmm.
They could have just taken me in, but they didn't. Another sign. But it wasn't until we were getting down to sentencing, and by some miracle, my attorney worked with the DA and told them that, look, he hasn't had a alcohol evaluation. We need to get him evaluated before we send him off for 10 years. And my attorney at that point, she just looked at my file and she's like, do you consider yourself an alcoholic? I was like, no, why do you say it? Because if you look at this file, this is clear alcoholic behavior.
Yeah.
She was probably the first one that really just pointed it out like that.
And once you saw it, what did you think?
When she said that, I mean, it got me thinking, because here's a total stranger that didn't know me besides this file.
Yeah.
And you can read this file and make the determination that you're an alcoholic just based on what you see on paper there. It's pretty strong stuff. So the DA agreed, and I did IOP there.
And that was sufficient to not have to go to prison at that point?
No, I was doing the IOP and I was doing counseling, and somehow something happened in that group, and I don't know what happened, but I started believing that it could work.
So you had a moment of clarity, or a period of clarity in there.
I did. In my mind, because I had been familiar with the steps and I knew what was coming, right? Because I had years of exposure.
Sure.
In my mind, all I wanted to get to was I wanted to make an amends to my parents before I went in.
To prison.
I was like, all right, let's just knock this out and then we'll go do our time, right?
Mm-hmm.
My lawyer ended up getting in touch with my counselor there, and I guess she had written a recommendation for me because of the work that I'd been doing. And then they got it in front of the DA.
Mm-hmm.
And when we were supposed to go up there to sign for the 10 years, she ended up giving me a 7-year probation option.
Wow. You can tell this really was impactful for you at that time. Wow. So all these little factors came together, and instead of being shipped away for 10 years in prison, you're given 7 years of probation.
Well, then when I go up there, so my lawyer calls me and say, "Hey, get up to Austin. You gotta come sign this paperwork. I don't know what you did in that rehab center, but they're giving you probation.
Wow.
So get up." Your cell was up there like the next day or the next week, whenever it was, and we go to sign it, and then the DA had actually come back and given us 5 years. 5 years of felony probation, but with the stipulation of any infraction, anything, you're going straight in. No questions asked. Yeah.
So you're that guy we talk about in meetings that gets chance after chance after chance after chance, but still doesn't get it until he finally gets it or he's dead.
But here's even the worst part about it. So even then, I just escaped going to prison, and I'm getting off on a 5-year probation on a 4 DWI, which is unheard of.
Yeah, it is.
Still didn't think I had a problem. My solution to it was that, okay, I'll go do AA for 5 years, get everyone off of my back, and then I'm going to go out. Or go back to what I was doing, right? Then I go see my probation officer for the very first time, December 23rd, 2012. And he's a young guy. Before I could even say anything, he's like, "Look, dude, I know what you're going to do." Okay, what? You're going to go to these bars on Washington. You're going to go to all these places. I know where you're going to go because I go to those places too. If I even see you at any of this, I don't care if you're drinking or not. If I even see you at any of these places, I'm revoking your probation right there. So I got home. I called a buddy of mine, and I told him, "Hey, look, I got to go do this thing. Come pick me up, and we're going to have a couple drinks, and that's it. And I'm done. For 5 years, I'm done." And we did. We went right down my street there in the Heights, and I had 3 final pints, my 3 favorite ones. But here's the crazy thing about it too, is I couldn't even finish them. I was so done, and that was it. And my buddy couldn't believe it. He was like, are you sure you want to go home now? I was like, "Yeah, I'm ready." And he dropped me off at home, and next morning is the routine that I've followed now probably for the last 6-7 years. I got up because I wasn't hungover, went to the gym, worked out, and then went to a noon meeting. And I was like, all right, I got to do this. I got to figure this out because I'm not going to get another chance. This is it.
And most veterans in AA would say to a guy who says, I'm going to do this for 5 years, I'm going to do it the way it needs to be done for 5 years, and then I'm going to drink. Most veterans, or I would say something like, okay, that sounds like a good plan. Because if you're working the program for 5 years, sooner or later it's going to infiltrate and it's going to have its effect. If you're seriously doing the work, and you'll hit 5 years, and that idea about drinking after that, the likelihood of you actually drinking at that point, after doing all of that work on a daily basis, going to meetings, working the steps, everything else. Yeah, well, you could drink tomorrow if you'd like, just don't drink today. Yeah, you can drink in 5 years, just don't drink for the next 4 years and 364 days.
Then what happened was the magic really happened, and all the pieces started to fall into place. Because I already had the counselors. I mean,
Yeah,
Robert, all these people that were, I mean,
I know those folks.
I know. I mean, I 100% will say I had the A team of recovery
Absolutely.
helping me,
Yeah.
you know? And again, that's another higher power thing to put me in that spot with those people. But once I was in, like I knew, okay, I'm going to do it. I'm in. I'm dedicated. I need to get a sponsor. I kept bouncing around. I couldn't find a sponsor. And then my therapist suggested I go to this recovery yoga class. And I got there early because I didn't know
Right.
what it was going to be like.
Yeah.
You know, it's like these guys are going to be like Cirque du Soleil in
Right.
here.
Uh-huh.
Walk in, first person I see is Wiley H.
Oh my gosh.
And we had a 15-minute conversation because this, you know, he was early to everything. He had just gotten back from one of the Olympic Games because he used to travel to them, and just hearing this guy talk about his travel and how free he was, and in my mind I thought, okay, if I can just have 1/1000th of what this guy has, whatever he's doing, then I'll probably be okay.
The late Wiley H., because he passed away a few
Yeah.
years ago. But he was one of those guys who embodied the program and saved a lot of lives along the way.
And here's where the higher power working for me is. There was no one else that I was going to listen to at that point.
Yeah,
Didn't find him in a meeting or in a retreat. I found him in a yoga class.
that's amazing.
And you know who was teaching that class? Dow H.
See, so you're talking about pieces fitting together brilliantly, and they really do, because the people you're talking about, the minute you told me their names, it's like I wasn't surprised, shocked, or in any kind of disbelief, because that's what those guys do. They're in there to save other people's lives by just being themselves and sharing their experience, strength, and hope.
That was the beginning of it. Once I met Wiley, we started working together. Everything just changed.
So you became an active member of Alcoholics Anonymous, hanging out in the middle of the program. If you're with Wiley, that's where he resided.
Those early days, we had the most amazing schedule. We would do step work at 5 o'clock on Fridays. 6 o'clock, we would do yoga. 7 to 8, we would have a break. And then at 8 o'clock, we'd go to poker night. And then Saturday, our men's meeting there at noon. I'd do coffee with the guys before that. Then it was just an amazing time. I mean, just so much recovery. And obviously, as you know, being around Wiley, you just...
Oh, he attracts it. He's like a magnet for the people who are working the program. Yeah, he was a beautiful, beautiful man.
The reason I knew that this time it was going to work is because I got down on my knees and I prayed to God. I said, look, if you really want me to stay sober, then you got to take away my number one resentment. No one knows about it.
Yeah.
Only you know. And that resentment was that since I grew up over here in the States, I didn't have a relationship with my grandfathers. I didn't have that bond. I don't even have a relationship with my uncles, right? One, I didn't even meet my dad's dad. He passed away before I was born. But I always felt like I missed out on life because I didn't have that. And there I go, meeting Wiley, who fits that.
Oh, perfectly. Wow. That is an amazing thank you for sharing that with me. The fact that you were able to be around one of the most spiritually centered men I've ever known in the program, to process that, I never cease to be amazed. And here's just another case of amazement.
I only got to work with him for 6 years because then, he passed, right?
Away.
But in those 6 years, I got my lifetime of what I needed.
The work that you've done has carried on the tradition of Wiley H. And I think anybody who knew Wiley, who met you and hears this story, will see where the work that you do today, somewhere, somehow, someplace, Wiley is working through you to do what you're doing now, which is beautiful.
Once I met him and I knew that this was it, this was God responding, like how could I even question it anymore? Here was the opportunity. Now you got to do it. Like you got to do the, because I still had to do the work, but now I had the opportunity to do it, and I wasn't going to let it slip. I mean, we worked together for those last 6 years, and I learned a lot from him. It wasn't even at the end of that 5-year period. It was probably at the end of year 1.
Yeah.
Where I wasn't really looking at stopping at year 5. At that point, I was like, I'm here. I'm home.
That's a really beautiful story. Thank you for sharing it with me.
Yeah, absolutely.
And suffice it to say that the work that you've done in AA since then has been enough to keep you sober and help others along the way. The you that I've seen over the years, although we didn't see each other for a while, the minute you drew that missing piece to Wiley and everything else, I got it. Bam, it fit. So seeing how you are in your program and the way you are around other men, like you were in tonight's meeting, it's no wonder you got a 12-year chip.
I remember asking Wiley one time, I think he was celebrating 42 or 43 years, because he passed right before his 45th anniversary. And I remember just asking him, hey, did you ever think you would have this much time?
Yeah.
And typical Wiley response was, no, I didn't think I'd live this long.
That's Wiley all over. That's Wiley all over. I'd like to dedicate this episode to Wiley and his memory. And anybody who listens to it and listens to how he affected your life from what you came from to be who you are today, they'll get it. Mm-hmm. They'll get it. And anybody else out there listening will know just how impactful and important good, strong people are in the program to other people who need them, and God puts together with them.
And he said the same thing. Yeah.
That's where I learned it. I learned it from him and other men like him over the years, because I was pretty close to him for a long, long time.
And it's only fitting that we're doing it here at Holy Name, because this was his
home.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I really want to thank you so much, Bruno, for doing this. You've really enlightened me and enriched my life by talking about how your life has worked out and the connections that were drawn to you through Alcoholics Anonymous. It makes a big difference. I honor your sobriety. I wish you the best of life with the sobriety. I love you, and I respect you as an AA brother. And again, many thanks for doing this.
Absolutely. Can I just add one last piece as we close out?
Uh-huh.
So, I met you originally going to the Outpost meeting, right?
I remember that.
And for anyone that's listening, it's a big meeting in Houston, a men's meeting. Howard would hug everyone that's coming into the meeting, right? And initially, when I was so new, like I didn't know how to take that, because it was difficult, because I couldn't accept love at that time, right?
Yeah.
But then you fast forward to maybe like 6 months, a year later, I was looking forward to those hugs, because I knew I was home.
Yeah.
And I know you get a lot out of doing that, but I just want to say thank you for welcoming me to those meetings, because I didn't feel like I fit in then, but as soon as I got that hug, I was like, all right, I can do this.
I really appreciate you saying that. That's very kind of you. It means a lot to me to be able to do that and have men receive it and know that it makes a difference. So thanks, Bruno.
Absolutely, man. It's an honor to be on here. Thank you.
Well, my friends, that's a wrap for today's episode of AA Recovery Interviews. I want to thank my guest, Bruno R., for sharing his story, and thank you for tuning in. If you enjoyed AA Recovery Interviews, will you please tell others how to listen to it? Of course, you can listen to many more interviews in this podcast series by following the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube Music. Or visit our website, AA Recovery Interviews, to hear every show, share your comments, and also contact us. By the way, this podcast strictly adheres to AA's 12 traditions and all General Service Office guidelines for safeguarding anonymity online. I pay all production costs, and no one receives financial gain from the show. AA Recovery Interviews and my guests do not speak for or represent AA at large. This podcast is simply my way of giving back to AA that which has been so freely given to me. The next episode of AA Recovery Interviews is on the way, so keep coming back. It'll be here soon.